So, in the previous video, we found 50% of numbers, 25% of numbers, 10% of numbers, and 20% of numbers. We're going to build on that in this section and find 15%, 12%, and then things like 2.3%. Now, all of this is going to require good number skills. And so what you're practicing here is both a method for finding percentages and you're practicing things like your times tables. So if it takes you time to do each question, don't worry that you don't know how to do percentages. Think, this is good, it's practicing my number skills. So, let's begin with 15% of 40. Okay, so this is the original amount. So that is 100%. Now, if you recall, in the previous part, we used 10% to help us work out 20%. What can we use here to help us work out 15%? Well, I'm going to find 10% again. How much is that? Good, that's 4. Now, I've got 10%, but I wanted 15. So how much more do I have to find to add on to my 10%? Oh, I need another 5%. Can I find 5% from what I've got so far? That's right. If I divide 10% by 2, or halve it, I'll get 5%. Now, you might be tempted to say here, multiply this by 3 and you'll get 15%. That's a really good idea. But look what we've already got here. Can you see we've already got 15%? Okay. So, what I'm going to do now is take a similar question, but with a trickier number. So 15% of 4.2. So 100% equals 4.2. So what does 10% equal? Well, you'll see straight away, I can't just take a 0 off, which is not actually what happens when you divide by 10. What happens when you divide by 10 is that the digits shift one place to the right. So let's do that here. Okay, let's find our 5% as well. So we half our 10% and then we add those two together. So the method, very similar. Just have to watch out for your decimal point. let's look at 12%. Okay, 12% of 50. Now, 10% we can find quite confidently after we've stated that 100% equals 50. So our 10% will be 5. Now, I need to find 2%. Now, when we wanted to find 20% previously, we found 10% first. So when I want to find 2%, I'm going to find 1% first. So, if 10% is 5, what's 1%? Well, how many ones go into 10? Okay, so what do we have to do to the number 5? Good, and how do we do that? Okay, 10 of these go into here, so we're dividing by 10. So we're dividing this by 10, which means we're going to move the numbers past the decimal point to 0.5. Then we're going to find 2%, which is 2 lots of 0.5 or a half, so it's 1. If you're not confident with decimals, you write them out like so. 5 add 5 is 10 and nothing left to add. So 12%. Here's our 10% and here's another 2%. So that totals 6. Okay, let's have a go at 12% now of 7.3. So 100% is 7.3. So 10%, I divide this by 10. So move everything over. If you keep it lined up, it's much easier to see. Now I want 1%, which means dividing by 10 again. So I'm going to move everything over again. And you should see a nice pattern start to emerge. Now, 2% is 2 lots of 1%. Because I'm not feeling confident here, I'm going to add them, or I could do a multiply. If it had been 7%, I wouldn't add it 7 times, I would multiply it. That's 6. Okay, so now we just have to find 12%. 12% then is our 10%. Add our 2%. Be careful with the decimals. Make sure your decimal points are lined up. And there we go. So, you can use this method to work out a whole range of percentages. You could use it to work out 37%. Without doing the question, can you describe how we would do it? So we would find 10% and use that to get 30%. We would use 10% to get 1%, and then use that to get 7%. The reason 10 and 1 are so useful is you can multiply them up to find any percentage you need. So if we wanted 89%, we would find 10%, then 80%, then find 1%, and then 9%. Last up on our list is 2.3% of 50. So, start with 100% being 50, and we almost always find 10% next, which is 5. Now I don't need 10%, I use 10% to find 1%. So that's dividing by 10 again. Notice the common layer. Now, I can find 2% now, which will be 1. And this is very similar to here. How do I find 0.3%? So what's next in the list? Well, it's 0.1%. So how many 0.1s go into 1? That's 10 again. So I take our answer from here and we're going to divide it by 10. So that's 0.05. Then to find 0.3%, we're going to times that by 3, which gives me 0.15. Now we've got the bits, circle them to make it clear where they are. That's 1.15. Take care with your decimals, line the numbers up in the columns. I think you're ready to practice now. In part 4, we'll look at what happens when you do a percentage increase or decrease to a number.